Most men come home to a house that's exactly the way they left it. I came home 3 days early and walked straight into something I am still not completely done processing. I thought I was surprising my wife. Turns out she was the one who had the surprise. And the people responsible for it were sitting in my living room waiting for me, like they already knew what they had done. Welcome to Dad's silent revenge. Get comfortable. Grab something warm to drink. And remember, every single person in this story made their choices with full awareness of what they were doing. Drop a comment below and make sure you're subscribed. You are going to want to stay for every word of this one. Let me tell you something about 22 years of marriage. After that long sharing a house, a life, a history, and yes, a single bathroom cabinet that somehow still causes arguments, you develop something that doesn't have a clean name, a sensitivity, a specific tuning to another person that operates below the level of thought. You feel when something is wrong before you can see it, before you can name it. You feel it the way you feel a change in weather before the clouds arrive. I felt it the moment I turned onto our street. My name is Michael Donovan. I am 56 years old. I spent the last 28 years building a mid-sized civil engineering firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. The kind of company that doesn't make headlines but keeps the road smooth and the bridges standing. That Tuesday I should have been in Atlanta. A regional infrastructure summit. 3 full days, hotel booked, presentations prepared. The keynote speaker had a medical emergency on day 1. The whole program collapsed by noon. I was on the first available flight home before the afternoon was over. No text to my wife, Patricia. No call. I figured I would pick up her favorite Italian food on the way from the airport, walk through the door, and actually sit across from the woman I had been eating dinner with on a laptop screen for 2 weeks straight. I was feeling lighter than I had in months. I should have known better than to trust that feeling. The first thing I noticed pulling into the driveway was my son's car. Derek is 28 years old. He has been married to his wife Amber for just over 3 years. They have their own place on the east side of Charlotte, a nice apartment, one that Patricia and I helped them furnish and set up when they first moved in. Derek does not do unexpected visits. Derek barely manages the scheduled ones. Seeing his car in my driveway on a Tuesday afternoon wasn't just unexpected. It was wrong in a way I couldn't immediately explain. I sat in my own driveway for a moment, out loud, to absolutely no one. I said, "Michael, why is your son's car here on a Tuesday?" I had no answer, so I grabbed my bag and walked to the front door. The second thing I noticed was the silence. Not comfortable silence. Not the silence of a house at rest. The other kind. The kind that has actual physical weight to it. The kind that tells you before anything else does that something in this house has already happened and the air itself is still carrying it. I pushed the door open. Derek and Amber were sitting in the living room on the couch. Together. And here's the detail that I want you to hold on to, because it is the detail that cracked everything open for me. They were not watching television. They were not on their phones. They were simply sitting there in complete stillness, like 2 people in a waiting room who had already made their peace with whatever news was coming their way. Derek looked up first. He was not surprised to see me. Think about that for 1 full second. Your father walks through the front door on a Tuesday afternoon when he is supposed to be in Atlanta, and you do not flinch. Not a single muscle in your face moves with surprise. No double take. No, Dad, what are you doing home? Nothing. Just a slow, measured blink and an expression I can only describe as someone who has already rehearsed the scene and is now simply performing their part in it. Amber smiled, and I want to be precise about this because it matters. That smile had no business being on anyone's face that afternoon. It was a smile of someone who had prepared a smile in advance. The wrong kind of smile for the wrong kind of room. I said, "Derek, what's going on? Where's your mother?" He cleared his throat. "Dad, hey, we were actually just getting ready to call you. Were you?" I said it completely flat. Not a question. Mom had an episode this morning. He said it carefully, like he was handling something fragile. She's at St. Luke's Medical, but she's stable. They say she's stable. I did not hear anything after St. Luke's Medical. I was back in my car in under 10 seconds. I know because I counted. Shock does something strange to the brain. It locks onto useless details, while the ones that matter try to take you apart from the inside. I called Ray on the way. Raymond Okafor has been my closest friend since 1989. The man has walked beside me through a business collapse, a brutal recession, and the absolute disaster that was my attempt at learning golf in 2011. If there is one person on this earth who will hand me the truth without softening a single edge of it, it is Ray. He picked up on the second ring. "Michael, what's up, brother?" "Patricia is at St. Luke's," I said. I just got home and Derek and Amber were sitting in my living room like two people who already knew the last chapter of a book before anyone opened it. Dead silence. Then, what do you mean already knew? Ray. My son did not react when I walked through that door. I was supposed to be in Atlanta. I heard him exhale. Then very quietly, very carefully, he said, Michael, I need you to stay calm. I am calm, I said. No, he said. You're behind the steering wheel doing 60 in a 40 zone. That is not the same thing. He was not wrong about any of it. St. Luke's Medical Center was 14 minutes from my house on a normal day. I made it in 8. I am not going to be elaborating on that. Dr. Anita Reeves met me at the nurse's station on the 2nd floor. She was a composed woman, early 50s, the kind of doctor who has delivered difficult news enough times that she has learned to do it without flinching and without performing. She looked at me with steady, direct eyes, and I was grateful for that immediately, because steady was exactly what I needed right then. Mr. Donovan, I'm glad you made it in. She said the way doctors say things when they mean more than the words themselves carry. Your wife was brought in this morning by your son. She presented with severe disorientation, significant fatigue, and her blood work came back showing elevated toxicity markers that we are currently running a full panel on. I said, toxicity markers. Yes. She held my gaze without wavering. I want to be straightforward with you, because I think you need that right now. The pattern we are seeing in her labs is not consistent with a sudden acute illness. The markers suggest something that has been accumulating over time. Gradually. That word, gradually. It landed in the center of my chest like something dropped from a height. I gripped the edge of the nurse's station with both hands and said very carefully, Dr. Reeves, are you telling me that something is being deliberately done to my wife? She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, I'm telling you that we need more answers before we draw conclusions. And I believe you need them too. I went in to see Patricia. I have seen my wife in every possible state over 22 years. I have seen her furious enough to make me genuinely reconsider decisions I was confident about 10 minutes earlier. I have seen her laughing so hard she couldn't speak. I have seen her exhausted, radiant, grieving, stubborn, tender. I have seen every version of the woman I married. I was not prepared for what was in that room. She looked diminished, like someone had been slowly, quietly turning a dial somewhere deep inside her and draining out everything that made her Patricia. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. The floor dripped, and the woman who once spent 45 minutes arguing a contractor into redoing our entire front walkway because the pavers were 2 degrees off level later looking impossibly fragile against those white hospital sheets. I sat down beside her, took her hand in both of mine. I am not a man who makes promises carelessly. Anyone who has known me for more than 6 months will tell you that. When I say something, I mean it completely, and I intend to be held to it. I told her, I'm here. I'm not leaving this hospital until I know exactly what happened to you. Every single piece of it. I walked back out to the waiting area. Derek and Amber had arrived. Of course they had. Derek stood up immediately and said, Dad, there's a lot we need to talk about. There's things you don't understand yet about what's been going on with Mom, and I think if you just let me explain the whole. I held up one hand. Just one hand, palm out, between us. Something in my face must have communicated exactly where we stood, because he stopped in the middle of that sentence like someone had reached over and pressed a button. I said, not yet. Then I walked to the far corner of that waiting room, sat down in a plastic chair under a humming fluorescent light, pulled out my phone, and started doing the one thing neither of them saw coming. I started removing every single financial access they had to our accounts. Every one. Joint accounts, savings, the household emergency fund that Derek had limited access to for genuine emergencies. All of it. Locked, restructured, access removed in under 4 minutes. I knew the notification would hit their phones almost immediately. I watched Amber's face from across the room while I did it. That smile she'd been carrying since I walked to my front door, that carefully assembled, wrongly timed smile, dissolved completely, like someone had wiped a whiteboard clean in a single stroke. Her eyes went to Derek. Derek's jaw tightened, and I thought, good. Now we are finally having an honest conversation. Because whatever is happening to my wife, I had just made it very clear that the financial chapter of this plan was permanently closed. The question that settled cold and quiet in my chest as I sat there was not whether something was wrong. The question was how deep it went. If you have been listening and you are not subscribed yet, take 5 seconds and do that right now. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to this channel. Thank you genuinely for being here. Let me tell you something about denial. Denial is the most comfortable place a person can live. It is warm in there. It will make you coffee and tell you that you are overthinking. It will look you directly in the eye and explain, patiently and reasonably, that the people you have built your life around are incapable of the things your gut has been trying to tell you for longer than you want to admit. I had been living in that comfortable place for a while, but sitting in that hospital parking lot at nearly 10 at night, with my wife connected to machines 30 feet above me and my son's carefully rehearsed expression burned permanently into my memory, I packed my things and walked out of denial for good, changed the access codes and everything. I called Ray. He picked up before the first ring finished. "Just talk," he said. "She looks terrible, Ray." My voice did something on those last two words that I am not going to describe in detail. The doctor used the word toxicity, said the pattern is gradual, not sudden, something building over months. I heard him breathe slowly. Then he said, "Michael, gradual means deliberate. You understand that?" "I know what it means," I said. "And Derek and Amber were in the house today." Silence. A long one. The kind where a person is choosing their words very carefully because they understand the weight of what they are about to say. Then Ray said something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. "Brother, I need you to think carefully about who had regular access to Patricia's food, her drinks, her daily medications, over the past several months. Think about who was physically present in that house on a consistent basis." And that is when it came back to me. 5 months ago, Patricia had slipped on the back porch steps during an early morning, sprained her wrist badly, bruised 2 ribs. Nothing that required hospitalization, but enough to slow her down significantly for several weeks. Derek had appeared almost immediately with a solution. Amber had a flexible work schedule, he said. She could come by the house every morning, help Patricia with breakfast, make sure she was comfortable, help her manage her daily vitamins and supplements while I was at the office. At the time, I had actually called Ray about it. I told him maybe I had been too hard on that boy. Maybe I had underestimated him. I would very much like to go back and have a word with a version of myself that said that. I went back inside the hospital. Derek was standing near the vending machines with his arms crossed, wearing an expression I can only describe as a man working very hard at looking innocent and not quite clearing the bar. Amber was seated with her phone face down on her lap. Now I need you to understand the significance of that detail. Amber is not a face-down phone person. In 22 years of knowing this woman through my son, I have never once seen her put her phone face down voluntarily. I watched her scroll through it during a Christmas prayer 3 years ago. I watched her check it twice during the eulogy at her own uncle's funeral. A face-down phone meant she was either waiting for a call she did not want to see or had already received one and needed to process it privately. Neither option was good. I sat down directly across from both of them. Derek said, "Dad, I understand how this probably looks from where you're standing." I said to you, "Derek, walk me through exactly how you think this looks because I am genuinely interested in your answer." He shifted. "Mom has been having health issues for a while now. We were trying to step up and help. Amber was coming by in the mornings, making sure she was eating, taking her vitamins." "Her vitamins," I repeated. "Yes." "Which one specifically?" He blinked. I watched it happen. "What?" I said, "Patricia takes 4 different supplements. She has taken them for years." "Which specific ones was Amber giving her every morning?" He looked at Amber. Amber looked at the floor. That 3-second exchange told me everything I needed to know without a single word being spoken out loud. I stood up. "Derek." I said his name the way my own father used to say mine when I was standing at the edge of a decision I could not walk back from. Quietly, with complete finality. "I need both of you to go home right now. Dad, just let me go home." They went. I sat back down in that waiting room with a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been brewed sometime in the previous decade, and I did what any man sitting alone in a hospital at midnight, suspecting something unthinkable, would do. I started looking at the numbers. I pulled up 6 months of bank statements on my phone. I am not a financial investigator. I am a civil engineer who still occasionally prints out directions rather than trusting GPS. But even I could see it. Withdrawals, small ones at first, $180, $260, $320, the kind of amounts that do not set off alarms, the kind that whisper instead of shout, the kind that are specifically sized to stay below the threshold of automatic fraud alerts. When I added them up across 5 months, the number was just over $12,000 from a joint household account that Derek had been given limited emergency access to 3 years ago when Patricia and I had taken an extended trip overseas and wanted someone local who could handle something urgent if it came up. $12,000. I called Ray at 1:30 in the morning. He answered like it was the middle of the afternoon. That man has never once let a call from me go to voicemail regardless of the hour, and I have never once taken that for granted. 12,000, I said without introduction. From which account? The household joint. Small consistent withdrawals over 5 months. Size to stay under the radar. Ray was quiet. Then he said, Michael, that is not impulsive. That is not someone who needed money and panicked. That is someone who sat down at a table and planned how to do this without being noticed. My son, I said, and those 2 words, my son, they nearly took me completely apart right there in that waiting room at 1:30 in the morning under fluorescent lights with a cold cup of terrible coffee in my hand. My son sat down and planned this. We do not know everything yet, Ray said carefully. Ray, I said, I know. He was quiet for a moment. Then very quietly he said, I know you do, brother. I know. The next morning Dr. Reeves found me in that same waiting room in the same chair, looking like a man who had survived something he had not yet fully named. She sat down beside me, which doctors do not typically do. I noticed it immediately. Mr. Donovan, the complete panel results are back. Tell me straight, I said. I need you to tell me straight. She folded her hands. Your wife has elevated levels of a compound consistent with prolonged exposure to a specific toxic substance. The concentration in her system and the pattern of organ stress indicates this was not a single exposure event. This was consistent ingestion over a period of months. Her kidneys are under significant strain. We have started targeted treatment, and I want to be very clear about this. We caught it. She has a genuinely strong chance at full recovery. I closed my eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then I said, Dr. Reeves, if someone were administering this to her deliberately, how would they do it without her knowing? She paused, chose her words carefully. It could be introduced through food or drink. It could also be introduced through supplements, particularly those in powder or capsule form that dissolve or absorb easily and have no distinctive taste or smell at standard doses. I heard Derek's voice in my head with perfect clarity. Amber was coming by every morning, making sure she was eating, taking her vitamins. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor loud enough to turn heads down the corridor. Dr. Reeves put a hand briefly on my arm. Mr. Donovan, I need to make a phone call, I said. I called my attorney first. Her name is Sandra Merritt, 32 years in practice. Sharp, precise, completely unimpressed by complexity. The kind of attorney who listens to everything before saying a single word and then says the exact right thing. I told her everything. The timeline, the supplements, the withdrawals, the morning visits, Dr. Reeves' findings, all of it in sequence without leaving anything out. She was silent for exactly 5 seconds. Then she said, Michael, do not go back to that house alone. Do not confront either of them directly. Do not discuss any of this with anyone outside of this call. And do not put a single word of it in a text message or an email. I said, Sandra, I want everything handled completely. No gaps. No room for them to maneuver. She said, by the time I'm finished, there will not be a crack in this wide enough to slide a piece of paper through. Within 20 minutes of hanging up, I called the bank, locked every remaining account, and had new access credentials issued exclusively to myself and Sandra's office. Every automatic transfer removed. Every secondary access revoked. All of it gone. My phone began ringing almost immediately. Derek, 4 times in 6 minutes. Then 2 calls from Amber. Then a text from Derek that read in full capitals, Dad, what did you do? Why can't I access anything? Call me back right now. This is urgent. I looked at that message for a long time. This was the same young man who had stood at my front door at Christmas 8 months ago and hugged me and said I was the best father he could have imagined having. I had believed him without question. I had repeated it to Ray the following week, like a man sharing good news. I typed back 1 sentence. You should have considered this before you touch my wife. I put my phone in my pocket and walked back upstairs to sit beside Patricia, because she was the only thing in that building that mattered. She was going to recover. Dr. Reeves had said so with the kind of quiet certainty that does not leave room for argument. But something else had arrived now. Something cold and focused sitting in the center of my chest in the exact place where the fear had been living for the past 18 hours. $12,000 and a poisoned wife do not happen without a destination. Nobody does something this patient, this calculated, this invisible, without a specific outcome in mind. I needed to find out exactly where they were trying to go. I called Ray that evening from the hospital chapel. I am not a particularly religious man in the formal sense. I do not attend services regularly, and I have never been comfortable with organized ceremony. But there is something about a chapel at night in a hospital that strips everything down to what is actually real. No performance. No pretense. Just the truth of wherever you are and whatever you are carrying. Ray answered on the first ring. How is she? He said. Stable. Improving. Treatment is working. Dr. Reeves is cautiously optimistic. Thank God, he said. And he meant it the way people mean things when they are not performing gratitude, but actually feeling it move through them. Ray, I said, I need you to do something for me. Something quiet. Nothing official yet. He said, name it. I need you to find out if Patricia made any changes recently. A will, a life insurance policy, anything legal with either my name or Derek's name attached to it. Anything that may have been updated or modified in the last several months. Silence. Then, Michael, you think this is about money. I said slowly and carefully, that my son needed $12,000 badly enough to take it without asking. And I think that whatever he needed that money for was not the end of the plan. It was the beginning of it. Ray exhaled. I'll make some calls tonight, he said. Give me until morning. I sat in that chapel for a while after I hung up, not praying exactly, just sitting with the specific weight of what it means to discover that the story you've been telling yourself about your family has a completely different version that other people have known about while you were still living inside yours. It is a particular kind of quiet devastation, the kind that does not announce itself loudly, the kind that simply settles. Ray called at 6:47 the following morning. I was at the window in the waiting room watching the Charlotte skyline come up gray and pale through the early morning fog, and I picked up before the second ring finished. Michael, he said, you need to be sitting down for this. I am already sitting, I said. Good. He paused. 8 weeks before Patricia ended up in that ICU, she visited an estate attorney. Alone. Did not mention it to you. I said nothing. Let him continue. Now, before you react to that part, he said, you need to hear the reason, because the reason matters enormously. Patricia had been quietly building something for the past 2 years. A foundation. An educational nonprofit focused on literacy programs for children in lower-income communities across Mecklenburg County. She had been doing it completely independently because she wanted to present it to you as a fully functioning operation. She wanted to walk through the door one day and show you something finished, something real. That was Patricia's way of doing things. I closed my eyes. That was exactly Patricia's way of doing things. She had gone to the estate attorney to update her life insurance policy. The original policy was standard. It had been set up years ago when Derek was young and listed him as secondary beneficiary in the event that something happened to both of us. Patricia went in to make one specific change. She wanted to remove Derek as secondary beneficiary and redirect the policy in full to her literacy foundation. Ray stopped. I said, how much is the policy? $2.1 million. He said, quietly. The waiting room went completely still around me. Derek had found out. Ray continued. The attorney's office could not confirm how, but the timeline makes it very clear that he knew. And the processing window on the policy change was 30 days from the date Patricia signed the paperwork. He paused again. Michael, she had 19 days left on that window when she collapsed. I sat with that. 19 days. My wife had 19 days left in whatever timeline Derek and Amber had constructed around her life. 19 days to finalize a legal document that would have removed Derek from $2.1 million permanently. And rather than pick up the phone and have a conversation like an adult, rather than ask a single question or express a single concern through any legitimate channel available to him, my son had sat down with his wife and decided that the most reasonable response to that information was to make sure Patricia did not live long enough to see that paperwork finalized. I sat in that chair, and I let the full weight of it land on me completely. I did not rush past it. I did not soften it or reframe it or look for an explanation that made it something other than what it was. My son had looked at his mother's life and decided it was worth less than $2.1 million. I let that be exactly as true and exactly as devastating as it was. Then I stood up, straightened my jacket, walked to the window, and looked out at Charlotte waking up below me, and I made a decision. I was not going to be loud about this. Loud was not what this required. Loud was sloppy. Loud gave people warning. Loud created opportunity for lawyers to build narratives and juries to develop doubts, and proceedings to stretch out across years, while the people responsible watched from a comfortable distance. I was going to be methodical. I called Sandra Merritt. She answered on the first ring with the focused energy of a woman who had been expecting this call and had already been thinking about it. I told her everything Ray had found, the insurance policy, the foundation, the timeline, the 19 days. All of it delivered in sequence, without emotion, because emotion was not useful in this conversation, and Sandra Merritt did not need it for me to understand the severity of what I was describing. When I finished, she was quiet for 4 seconds. I counted. Then she said, "Michael, I want you to hear me clearly. Do not go to that house. Do not contact either of them directly. Do not discuss details with anyone new. From this moment forward, every communication about this matter goes through me first." I said, "Sandra, when this lands, I need it to land completely. Every door closed, every exit sealed before they even realize they need one." She said, "By the time I file this, there will not be a thread loose anywhere in it. I promise you that." I said, "I want them to feel the full weight of every single decision they made." She said, "Michael, I have been practicing law for 32 years. I have been waiting for a case this clean for most of them. Trust me, I trusted her. The next 72 hours were the longest continuous stretch of time I have ever lived through. But Patricia was improving. That was the anchor. That was the thing I came back to every time the rest of it tried to pull me under. Patricia was improving. Dr. Reeves updated me morning and evening with the steady, unhurried precision of someone who took the job of delivering hope as seriously as the job of delivering hard news. The treatment was working. Her kidney function was responding. The toxic levels in her blood work were declining with each panel. And on the second morning at 7:23, I was sitting in the chair beside her bed when her eyes opened. She looked at the ceiling first. Then slowly, carefully, she turned her head and looked at me. Her voice came out rough and thin and barely above a whisper. "Michael," she said, "you look absolutely terrible." I laughed, a real laugh, loud enough that the attending nurse looked to the door window with an expression somewhere between concern and confusion. I leaned forward and said, "You are in an ICU, and your opening line is a critique of my appearance." She said, very quietly but with complete precision, "Someone has to maintain standards in this relationship." I took her hand in both of mine, and I did not let go. I did not tell her everything yet. She needed rest. She needed to heal. She needed days of good food and proper sleep, and the steady reassurance of monitors showing numbers moving in the right direction before I put the full truth of what had happened in front of her. But I told her she was safe. I told her I knew what had happened. I told her that everything was being handled and that she did not need to carry any of it right now. She looked at me for a long moment with those clear, sharp eyes of hers, the eyes that had been seeing straight through every version of me for 22 years without ever once getting it wrong. Then she said it was Derek, wasn't it? Not a question, a statement. I did not answer. I just held her hand and looked at her steadily. She turned her head toward the window. The morning light was coming through the blinds in long, pale strips across the bed. She said quietly, "I kept hoping I was wrong about what I was feeling. I kept telling myself I was imagining it." I squeezed her hand once. She closed her eyes. "You came home," she said softly. "You came home early." "I did," I said. She nodded slowly. "Good," she said. "That's good." She was asleep within minutes. I sat there beside her and watched her breathe and thought about how many ordinary mornings I had taken completely for granted. How many times I had been in a hurry and kissed her forehead without stopping. How many dinners I had eaten with a laptop open between us. How many times a conference had run late and I had texted instead of called and told myself there would be more time later. There is never as much later as you believe there is. On the fourth day, Sandra called me with information that physically rearranged my face. Ray, through channels I will not detail here because they involved a level of quiet resourcefulness that I have always appreciated about the man, had obtained exterior surveillance footage from a supplement retailer located 2 towns over from Charlotte. Derek had visited that store on 4 separate occasions across a 4-month period. Always alone, always cash, always purchasing the same specific product. Always, except the final visit, when the exterior camera showed Amber sitting in the passenger seat of Derek's car in the parking lot waiting for him. The supplement in question contained a compound that, in doses above the standard recommended amount administered consistently over a period of months, produced a toxicity profile that matched Patricia's blood work results with a precision that left no interpretive room whatsoever. Sandra also had the complete bank withdrawal records. She had the state attorney confirming the full timeline of the insurance update and Derek's subsequent contact with that office. Because Derek, in what I am still struggling to fully categorize as either spectacular arrogance or breathtaking carelessness, had called the estate attorney's office approximately 3 weeks after Patricia had filed her paperwork. He had identified himself as Patricia's personal assistant. He had called from his own cell phone, his personal cell phone. The one registered to his name. The one he carried in his pocket every single day. The one whose number I had memorized years ago, because that is what fathers do. When Ray told me, I set my coffee down on the waiting room table and looked at the wall directly in front of me for a full 10 seconds without speaking. Then I said, Ray, I need you to help me understand something. Did this man spend 4 months executing a plan that required patience and precision and complete invisibility, and then call the estate attorney from his personal cell phone? Ray said, brother, the answer to that question is yes. I said, how is that possible? He said, Michael, I have been asking myself the same question since last night, and the only conclusion I can reach is that arrogance at a certain level stops functioning as a character trait and starts functioning as a cognitive impairment. I almost laughed. Not quite, but almost. They arrived on the 5th day. Together, of course together, carrying flowers. White lilies in a clear plastic sleeve from a grocery store florist, still bearing the price sticker on the back, which under different circumstances might have been funny. They came through the main entrance, and Derek saw me standing in the corridor outside Patricia's room and immediately deployed a smile, the kind that is assembled from the outside and rather than the inside out. The eyes 17 seconds behind the mouth. Dad, he said it warmly. How is she? We have been so worried. We should have come sooner. We just wanted to give you space. I looked at him, then at Amber, then back at him. She is awake, I said. She is talking. Dr. Reeves says she is going to make a complete recovery. I watched his face. I want to be precise about this because it matters. What moved behind Derek's eyes in that moment was not relief. It was not joy. It was not the unguarded, involuntary softening that crosses a person's face when they hear that someone they love is going to be all right. It was a calculation, fast and brief and instantly suppressed, but completely visible to a father who had been watching that face for 28 years. The rapid internal adjustment of a person whose plan has just failed and who needs to determine in real time what the next move looks like. Amber said, that is such wonderful news. She put her hand to her chest. We have been beside ourselves. The police are on their way, I said, just like that. In the same tone, I might use to mention that I had scheduled the gutters to be cleaned, flat and quiet and completely without drama. Derek's face drained of color with a speed that was almost clinical to observe. He said, what? Sandra Merritt filed everything this morning, I said. The toxicology report, the pharmacy surveillance footage, the bank withdrawal records, the phone call to the estate attorney, which was made from your personal cell phone. Derek, in case that detail had slipped your mind, the insurance policy timeline, all of it organized and filed in a package that does not have a single loose end anywhere in it. Amber made a sound that I can only describe as composure physically departing a human body, like watching something solid become liquid very suddenly. Derek said, Dad, just listen to me for 1 second. I can explain what this. Just let me. If you would just. I said, Derek. His mouth stayed open. I said, I want you to hear me. There is not a sentence in the English language that covers what you did. There is not a combination of words available to you right now that changes what those documents say, or what those records show, or what your mother's blood work confirmed. So I am asking you to stop talking. He closed his mouth, then opened it again. I said, the flowers are nice. Leave them at the nurse's station on your way out. Your mother will appreciate them from someone else. They were arrested in the hospital parking lot at 2:17 in the afternoon. Sandra had time to filing with the precision of a woman who understood that the circumstances under which an arrest happens are not incidental details. They are part of the record. Derek and Amber were still holding those white lilies when the officers approached them beside their car. Derek tried to talk, because Derek has always believed that his voice was his most powerful tool and that the right combination of words delivered with enough confidence could walk him out of any room. Amber went quiet immediately, the specific quiet of a person who has already begun calculating what cooperation might be worth. Ray appeared beside me at the window. I genuinely do not know when he arrived. He simply materialized the way he always does at the moments that matter most, without announcement, without making about himself. Simply present in the way that the best people in your life always manage to be. We stood together at that window and watched. After a while he said, how are you doing? Not as a formality, as a real question that deserved a real answer. I thought about it honestly before I spoke. I said, I feel like I aged 15 years in 5 days. I feel like I want to sleep for a month and never think about a hospital waiting room again. I feel like something I spent 28 years building has a crack running through it that is never going to fully disappear. Ray nodded, said nothing, let me finish. And I said, I feel more certain about what matters than I have felt about anything in a very long time. He looked at me. I looked back toward Patricia's room down the corridor. Through the small rectangular window in her door, I could see the shape of her in the bed, the monitors, the soft steady light, the slight movement of her hand as she shifted in her sleep. I said, she is going to be fine. She was always going to be fine. Patricia is the single most resilient person I have ever known in my life. The fact that she married me is the clearest possible evidence that she can survive anything. Ray laughed, a full, real laugh that bounced off those corridor walls, and for just a moment, just one, lifted everything. For months later, Patricia came home. She walked through the front door of our house on a Saturday morning in November, when the Carolina light was doing that particular thing it does in late fall, gold and unhurried and completely indifferent to everything that has happened under it. She stood in the front hallway and looked around the way a person looks at a place they were not certain they would see again, taking inventory, reclaiming it room by room with her eyes. Then she turned to me and said, "Michael, this hallway needs new paint." I said, "I painted this hallway 14 months ago." She said, "I know when you painted it. It still needs new paint. The color is wrong." I said, "Patricia, I spent 3 weekends on this hallway." She said, 3 weekends on the wrong color is still the wrong color." She walked past me toward the kitchen. "I want coffee, and I want it to be good coffee, not the hospital version. And then I want to sit at my own kitchen table and not move for approximately 4 hours. I made the coffee. I made it exactly the way she liked it, the way I had memorized without meaning to across 22 years of ordinary mornings that I was never going to take for granted again. We sat at the kitchen table together. No laptop between us. Just the coffee and the late morning light through the window and the sound of the neighborhood going about it Saturday and the woman I almost lost sitting across from me talking about paint colors with the focused authority of someone who has decided that living fully and completely is the best possible response to everything that tried to stop her. Derek and Amber faced charges of attempted murder, criminal conspiracy, and financial fraud. Sandra Merritt prosecuted with the energy of a woman who had found her purpose and intended to honor it completely. The trial ran 9 days. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. The verdict, when it came, was complete. I was sitting in that courtroom beside Patricia when it was read. She was holding my hand, not gently, with the grip of a woman who had decided that she was going to hold on to what mattered and was prepared to make that a physical fact. When it was over, she leaned close to me and said very quietly, "I want Thai food." I said, "Right now?" She said, "Michael, I have been thinking about Thai food for 4 months. Do not make this difficult." So we got Thai food. Ray came. Sandra came. Dr. Anita Reeves, who Patricia had apparently charmed so thoroughly during her recovery that she had become something resembling a friend, came. We sat around a table at a restaurant Patricia had chosen with the decisive authority of a woman who had earned the right to choose every restaurant for the foreseeable future, and we ate and we talked and we laughed. And I watched Patricia gesture with both hands while telling a story about something a nurse had said during her second week of treatment, and the laugh came out of her fully and completely, and I thought, there she is. There is Patricia. I said at the beginning of this story that I came home early and walked into something that changed everything. I was right about that. But here's what I did not know when I walked through that front door and saw my son sitting in my living room with that rehearsed expression and that wrong silence. I did not know that coming home 3 days early was the only reason my wife was alive. One more day in Atlanta. One more dinner alone in a hotel room with a room service menu and a television I was not watching. One more morning letting the conference run its schedule. And Patricia does not make it to that Saturday morning in November. She does not get to stand in the hallway and reclaim her house room by room. She does not get to sit at the kitchen table and tell me the hallway is the wrong color. She simply does not come home. So no, I would not change a single thing about how that Tuesday happened. I would not change the early flight. I would not change the Italian food I never got to pick up. I would not change walking through that door and seeing what I saw and feeling what I felt and moving the way I moved. You cannot control what people choose to become when they believe no one is watching. You can only control what you do the moment you realize they were wrong about that. I came home. I turned every light in that house on, and I made absolutely certain that everyone who had been operating in the dark faced exactly what they had done in full and permanent daylight. That is the job. It has always been the job. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that coming home is never just a small thing, hit that like button right now and subscribe to Dad's Silent Revenge. Drop a comment below and tell me which moment hit you hardest. Every single comment gets read. I will see you on the next one.